Right, meanwhile in Canberra, the government's confusion about what its Indigenous voice to the Parliament can and can't do just got worse. On Melbourne radio this morning, the Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus conceded that the voice could make representations about anything. Here he is.
Surely every decision made by the Parliament affects them.
Potentially that's so, but I think you'll find over time that the voice will be making representations about the matters which most affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
He said the voice wouldn't need to wait to be asked. Instead, the voice would be proactive.
In terms of how it'll work, will it be proactive? Can it make representations without being consulted?
Yes, and that's the power that's given by this change to the Constitution to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. It will be able to make representations.
Even being able to go direct to the Governor-General.
Insofar as it's ever relevant for the Governor-General to need to receive a representation from the voice, then of course he would do so.
Yet here's the Prime Minister a couple of hours later brusquely dismissing a question about whether the emissions safeguard mechanism, now agreed with the Greens, would have to be run past the voice if they were there.
And would a voice provide advice to the Greens as they would the government, or is it purely for legislation like this? How would that work?
Of all the very strange questions I've been asked about the voice, that's up there. The voice is about matters that directly affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. You know, give advice on who should play 5-8 for South this week, but that is not what it is about. The voice is not about defence policy. It's not about foreign affairs policy. It's not about these issues.
He must think we're stupid. He must think we don't watch one press conference to the next. He's already said that there'd be a foreign policy First Nations impact under Labor. It's First Nations ambassadors in the Department of Foreign Affairs. Honestly, this is a PM that's all over the shop when it comes to the voice. And what's worse, he still wants you to vote for it, despite all these manifest and growing problems with his proposal. He says the voice is about matters that directly affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and that we shouldn't look for on the voice distractions. He uses those words, directly affect. That's what he said today. But that's not the actual words of his referendum. The government's proposal is to amend the Constitution so that the voice may make representations to the executive government on all matters relating to Aboriginal people. And why wouldn't the safeguard mechanism relate to Indigenous people, given that emissions will take place on native title land? And as the AG also conceded on ABC's Insider program on the weekend, if the voice doesn't have a chance to advise on matters such as the safeguard mechanism, there is at least, quote, a possibility of a High Court challenge.
Will it be able to go to the High Court, point to the words in the Constitution that say they may make representations to executive government and make a case that they have not been heard?
That's a possibility.
That's why the government's refusal to release the Solicitor-General's advice is so telling. It's damning, particularly given report after report that both the Solicitor-General and the Attorney-General had concerns about the voice advising the executive government as well as the Parliament.
Typically, it was reported that both you and the Solicitor-General had concerns about the High Court implications, and you took it to the advisory panel where it was debated at length. Is that untrue?
Of course there was debate about the final form of the words, but I'm not going to comment on private discussions.
Oh,
the important thing is
fair go. I mean, this is very... I mean, you've got the Solicitor-General's advice secret, your discussions are secret. The public needs to know on this. They want to support it. They desperately want to support it.
If the Solicitor-General really does advise, nothing to see here on The Voice, why wouldn't the government release his advice? After all, they had not the slightest qualm releasing the Solicitor-General's damning opinion on whether former PM Scott Morrison should have been sworn into all of those ministries.
Advice has been released by your government in the past, as recently as a few months ago. This is even more in the public interest than what Scott Morrison did. Why not release it?
It's a very, very, very different situation, Neil. to have Mr Morrison's secret ministries, which needed to be exposed and did warrant the very unusual step of the Solicitor-General's advice being made public.
If it's really there, then the public deserve the reassurance of the official legal advice on this increasingly confused and contentious voice, because what the PM is telling us seems to change day by day. But it's not what he's telling us that worries me the most, it's what he's not telling me that concerns me most of all.